Close your eyes. He's right down the road. He's right down the road in the shopping center next to your grocery store. And he's having a VTC that involves all of the federal Congress. They're voting on something. But you know when he's voting on that, or when the rest of Congress is voting on it, it's already been parsed through the indictment engine, and it has a constitutionality to it. Because if it doesn't, everyone who is a sponsor of that bill, including your representative, is named. And then the local militia can go visit them and say, hey, you guys are trying some funny business. Either you retract this, or we're going to start looking at what assets you have, so that way we can take them.
Our great God, how we thank you for being just that, our God. And we acknowledge once again, Lord, you are sovereign over everything. And Lord, you have made we the people the sovereign over this republic. And Lord, we're learning now, after generations of ignorance, abnegation, laziness, sloth, we're learning now what is required of us to keep this republic. And so, Lord, as we come again this morning and have a further discussion on the other tool that the crafters gave us, we ask, Lord, that you would come and be right here in our midst, both both here with the speakers, and here with we the listeners. We'll give you the praise for it, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. Praise the Lord. Brad Boardman once again here with the Sovereign Solutions Show. This is a podcast. Both you may be watching this or you may just be listening to the audio, but we are a podcast that is determined to speak only about things related to tactical civics, the action arm of the America Again Trust. And we believe that tactical civics is we the people actually knowing the truth and taking action upon it. And so this episode today is, I believe, episode number 6 in the series that we've been doing here on, as I've said, the other tool. The crafters gave us 2 tools in the Constitution that give we the people the capacity to enforce the Constitution. Think about that. Enforce the Constitution. And those 2 tools are grand jury and well-regulated militia. And so we've been doing this series on well-regulated militia, and my good friend Kevin Ennett coming to us once again from Colorado. Kevin, we've been having some fun, haven't we?
Indeed we have. I appreciate you tolerating me for all this time.
Oh, not the case at all. There's no toleration here. This is every time we get a chance to get in this room together, and you know, really we've determined that we're going to just take this slow walk through the whole idea of militia, what that means. And of course, we've known right from the get-go that in this day and age, just the word militia, brings to mind, unfortunately, all kinds of things that it is not. And so that really is one of the main purposes in this series that we're doing, is to begin to try to destigmatize the word militia. You know, if you were to go back and examine the history of militia and take a look at what militia was and what it looked like at the founding of this republic, you would find that it didn't look anything like what most people think of today when they hear the word militia. Is that a fair statement?
It is. I'd probably say, just to drive the point home a little bit, like, it doesn't look anywhere near what the enemy painted us to believe it looks.
Yeah. Well, and of course, when we begin the discussion of militia and the fact that it is in the Constitution, it was there when the Constitution was ratified, and it's there today still, and in the amendments to the Constitution. Of course, the Second Amendment is, well, there again, today, when people hear the words the Second Amendment, they automatically spring to gun control. Yeah. But I think we made a point the last episode of the first, what'd you say, the first 13 words of that amendment are the ones that we really ought to be emphasizing these days.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah. So the fact of the matter is that militia is real. It is, in terms of a duty, in terms of a concept, in terms of the fact that it is in our Constitution, and the Second Amendment to the Constitution is really all about militia, not about guns and whether or not we can have them. I mean, if you're going to have militia, that of necessity means that people will own guns. And, yeah.
Every state constitution too, either in the preamble or the first clause, it's always supportive of that simple fact.
Yep. Well, we talked a little bit beforehand how we were going to approach this, and well, let's start off with that quote that you. I think it's a quote out of Time to Start Over America, which is David Zuniga's book on our vision of restoring well-regulated militia here in this republic. But that quote says, "What we see today is the kicking, screaming death of American communism, not its birth." And I don't know if you want to make any comment on that as we get started, Kevin, or not.
This is one of those statements that you hear 100 times and it really never sinks in. And
Yeah.
the moment it does, it's an epiphany. It was kind of mind blowing to me because I'd been part of Tactical Civics for years, and I'd always hear him capitulate in that same statement.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until recently I was like, you know what? That's just like, what would Jesus do? Or Jesus take the wheel? Like, you put those things that you can't control up to Jesus, and it gives you that calming equanimity about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And this is another one of those statements that if you just look at it in perspective, the world might be on fire, but then you understand that this is temporary and I'm fireproof. Easy.
Yeah.
I think it's a great statement.
Yeah. Well, and especially as we noted, it has the word American communism in it, and right there, if people have their brain engaged, they might go, "What? American communism?" In other words, most people today, you hear Donald Trump at his rally saying, "America will never be a communist country." Well, hello. If you take a look at at Marx's manifesto and examine that, even just in a cursory way, you realize that all 10 planks of his manifesto have been up and operational in America for at least 100 years.
Since Woodrow Wilson, he specifically did.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so from that though, let's talk about what you've got down here in the notes, owning guns. Why don't you go ahead and kick us off with that?
So you've said this a number of times, and I think that it's kind of come to characterize whenever people have that visceral response to the word militia, it's because they have this framework in mind, and this is the way that the enemy's painted it. So you have to say, like, owning a gun or cool gear doesn't make you part of militia. It's pseudo soldiering is what it is in the militia groups that are out there nowadays. And you have to put it in perspective because, like, well regulated, as the Second Amendment says, means trained, disciplined, prepared, not controlled by the government, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about
wait a minute. Pause right there real quick. So well-regulated militia is not controlled by the government. I mean, that one needs to sink in.
It sure does.
Go ahead.
We the people, it's above the government.
Yeah.
You have to understand that. It's about, and we've got a few bullets here I'll just kind of blaze through, but it's about lawful force under lawful authority. There's training cycles, there's local oversight, there's command structure. You're not in camis or in camouflage utilities running around the woods trying to be sneaky, or you're not up armored in like bulletproof vests and things like that. You're essentially, you've got a badge, a sidearm, there's no cosplay, there's no camo.
Yeah.
The neighbors know you, you're well respected, you're backed by law, you're the pillar of the community. Yeah. And if you're not, then you're not part of the militia. Is that simple?
That is so. Again, I go back to this business of what we're trying to do here. In part, is to destigmatize the word militia, and if people can begin to bend their brains a little bit to this idea that it has nothing to do with out in the woods with camo and big guns. It has to do with we the people operating in our authority as neighbors, protecting our certainly our rights, and really watching over people who are trying to infringe on those things. Whether it's via corruption, whether it's via, laws that are not constitutional. Boy, I tell you, when we get these two institutions stood up and operational in our county, won't that be something to be able to begin to examine all that we've been living under for generations, layer upon layer upon layer of stuff that purports to be law, but is really void.
Shine some light into those dark corners.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
So
and I
yeah,
mean
continue.
that begs the question, because there are current militia groups, right? What is the difference between lowercase militia and uppercase militia? It's ultimately how they're formed. There's a framework that you're supposed to go through. We've gone over that in the past. We're going to kind of dissect one of the militia ordinances for the future episodes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's understandable why those militia groups that we've reached out to for years and years and years aren't necessarily interested in becoming constitutional.
Mm-hmm.
They don't understand like what that framework is. But above all, they're very suspicious, because the first thing is you got to like let the federal government control your training funding. You got to let the state appoint your officers, and that right away they're like, I'm not doing that. We're supposed to be in like in resistance towards this government,
Mm-hmm.
and that's partially true, but there takes some finesse in there. So like that's another thing that we need to dispel the stigma that comes with it, because you're not in rebellion to government. It's just a matter of like whenever you go to school, in order for you to not be able to go into the parking lot and leave as a young man with a car in high school, they have hall monitors, they've got teachers, they've got staff on hand to say, hey, no, get back to class, right? And that's not a rebellious function.
Mm-hmm.
That's just accountability.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think this is a really good place to insert, maybe for the first time, this statement that we talked a little bit about earlier. Uh, uh, Standing up grand jury and militia in our counties is not revolution. It is restoration.
Yep.
Restoration. And, again, accompanied with the word militia these days, somebody's mind might spring toward that revolution, uprising, chaos laden idea. No, what we're trying to do here in tactical civics is to restore these two institutions to their rightful place.
Yep, indeed. And that's a great segue into the next part. The next topic heading we've got is militia's primary role is execute the laws of the Union as stated in 1815. But it's a means to accountability. And so like you look at it as, although Congress legislates, the grand jury serves as a mediator between the people and the government. It's not in rebellion to, it's restoration of what enabled us to be great in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
As the militia, and as the militia, we the people are formed in official capacity, just like the grand jury. And that's whenever you take on that mantle of being we the people. That is when you're in service to your fellow man, right, your adjacent people within the United States.
So that realization right there, again, I just don't think we can emphasize this too much, but grand jury and militia are we the people, operating in certain functions. And, I think we really need to begin to get that ingrained in our thought process. We said we the people at the front end of the Constitution do establish and ordain. So that was us all together setting this republic in order. But then within that Constitution, the crafters gave us these two tools, and we need to realize that grand jury is we the people operating in a certain way, and militia is we the people operating in another way, which is supportive of the grand jury. So anyway, again, I'm all about taking this nice and slow here, and hopefully making people actually think about these things and realize. So anyway, continue.
It's been a missing element, and the reason why we've got chaos nowadays is because you've got a child servant with no parent to correct them. It's really
Mhm.
that simple. And this
Yeah.
is the parental controls that we put into place for ourselves. We all wanted to be kids and play, and we didn't want to take on that responsibility. And now we're sitting in the mess that our house is.
It reminds me, this is totally spontaneous here, but it reminds me of a comment I made in a thread a day or two ago. Can you remember specifically what well, how did we get to from this to this is what the thread was talking about. And I said, I talked about that, we the people being the parent,
Mhm.
having created this government, the child, and then we the parent crawled in the back seat and went to sleep, and expecting that the child was gonna follow the instructions in the Constitution and just drive us to where we needed to be. And my thought was, when we Van Winkle finally began to wake up a little bit and look out at the scenery. What?
Yep.
Here we are.
Unfortunately, we
Here
want to
we
go right.
are. We Van Winkle. We've got the kid in the front seat. That spoiled brat government is still hanging onto the wheel, and he's got us high centered on some rock teetering over the edge of the cliff.
Man,
Anyway, that was
you better trademark that term because that's a good kid's book on
yeah.
civics.
Funny.
But the grand jury, it's a means to accountability with him, and it was so in the settlements, the parishes of early America. As a matter of fact, without these ancient tools that were designed to be wielded by the people to literally keep kings in check,
Yeah.
America's War of Independence would have never even been possible. Like, so we were doing this work before we even became a country. We were doing this work after we became a country. And when that fell off, we basically forfeited our strength.
Right.
So I mean, like you said, it's you form in certain capacity in order to be we the people. It takes much more than a bumper sticker to be that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
I
is.
love I love that phrase too. That just went by. The keeping kings in check. Okay, when grand jury really originated, that's what it was about: is keeping kings in check. Okay, that king was not going to any longer, uh, just lord every breath over us. So grand jury was came into being as a means of keeping kings in check. So now in this republic, grand jury is here as a means of keeping our servants, our servant government in check, so that
Yep.
they don't turn into some lord or master or get the idea that they are the king.
Yeah. I think that that's timely as well, almost divinely inspired. That phrase that we've used as titles to a lot of the texts that we've got within the training environment, because nowadays you have the movement No Kings, right? And
Yep.
they form and they set up and they protest all over the United States. So they see it from that side of it, right? Can you
Mhm.
imagine if they saw a book on the shelf that says to keep kings in check? Like there's a whole portion of our
Write
civilization
that book.
trying
You'll
to get
make
rid
some
of.
money.
Yep. So I'll read on here. It says the grand jury was the most powerful tool available to small township colonists to push back against the overstep of the king, the only legal or lawful avenue available to peacefully guard against oppressive, tyrannical overreach. And this is where we're going to get into the meat of it, of a conversation on grand jury, because I think the grand jury, we've often described it as 70%, while militia is 30%. Hopefully, if grand jury functions the way it's supposed to, you never actually have to utilize most of the features that come within the militia.
Hmm.
But to illustrate the proper function of this locality level asset, a function found virtually nowhere in present day form, grand jury is characterized by the late Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia in the case U.S. versus Williams that went down in 1992. Now, you told me before we came in this that you wanted to go through this slowly, and you know that I don't slow down whenever I've had two
Well,
cups of coffee.
let me just take a stab at reading it. We've just what this is a quote from Antonin Scalia in U.S. v. Williams, 1992. And it's just 3 paragraphs that we're going to read here. And I just think that it's good for us to look at and listen to his description of grand jury. So here we go. He says, in fact, the whole theory of the grand jury function is that it belongs to no branch of the institutional government, serving as a kind of buffer or referee between the government and the people. Although the grand jury normally operates, of course, in the courthouse and under judicial auspices, its institutional relationship with the judicial branch has traditionally been, so to speak, at arm's length. Judges' direct involvement in the functioning of the grand jury has generally been confined, love that word, confined, to the constitutive one, calling the grand jurors together and administering their oaths of office. In other words, the judge impanels the grand jury by swearing them in.
And in that moment, they become the highest form of government, even above the judge that just swore them in.
Yeah. Oh,
And this is from like so
that's
Ennett Scalia.
He
was
where you,
for a while, and
yeah,
he was very respected because of his understanding of constitutional law, and you can see his growth throughout the years in that position. And I think he did very well. But this right here is kind of the nugget that might be a reason why he's dead, honestly.
yeah,
But
yeah, could be.
ultimately, like, this is where it clarifies. There's still 2 more. I wanted to drive that home because, like, once you're sworn in, now you as the grand jury are the highest form of government in the county. There's nobody who can abolish you. There's no one that you are accountable to the people themselves, right?
Right.
And within that responsibility, you are to act confident.
Yeah.
Just like you're supposed to in understanding what Jesus bled for on Calvary, you have to have the confidence in what that bought you.
Yeah.
You have that confidence of what your position is in the county, so that way you can hold those people that are your servant government to task.
Excellent. Yeah. So that was paragraph 1. We got 2 more to go here. It says, again, Antonin Scalia says the grand jury's functional independence from the judicial branch is evident both in the scope of its power to investigate criminal wrongdoing and in the manner in which that power is exercised. Unlike a court, whose jurisdiction is predicated upon a specific case or controversy, the grand jury can investigate merely on suspicion that the law is being violated, or even because it wants assurance that it is not.
That's
I mean, if that doesn't, what a great, you get your mind around that to realize that the scope of the grand jury, it can go in to say, we believe this law may be being violated, and we're going to investigate that. But oh, by the way, nobody has even said that law is being violated, but we want to go in and look to make sure that it's not being violated by anybody, just commonly, I think is maybe where that goes to. Is that what do you think about that, Kevin?
I think that's huge.
Yeah.
Absolutely huge.
Yeah.
And it's a good, like, the Paladin of Liberty book that we'll mention in a little while, the Citizen's Guide. There's Richard Younger has a thing in there. It says something to the effect of the grand jury's power is only limited in scope by their own imaginations.
Yeah. So, of course, that has been taken to, I don't know who's credited with originally talking about the grand jury being able to investigate a ham sandwich if it wants. It's doubtful that any grand jury would do a ham sandwich investigation, but the point is that it has the power to investigate anything that it deems necessary. So finally here, Scalia says it need not identify the offender it suspects, meaning grand jury need not identify the offender it suspects or even the precise nature of the offense it is investigating. The grand jury requires no authorization from its constituting court to initiate an investigation, nor does the prosecutor require leave of court to seek a grand jury indictment. And in its day-to-day functioning, the grand jury generally operates without the interference of a presiding judge. I just like to let certain words sink in, you know.
Thank you for swearing us in. You are dismissed.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not to say that the grand jury wouldn't, if it decided it needed to call in a prosecutor and, ask counsel of a prosecutor, something like that, but that would be at their discretion. They don't take their orders as is common. It's my understanding that it's any grand jury. California's got 20 some counties that have grand jury on their government web page. So yeah, people can volunteer to as grand jury be in the grand jury pool, but then when they're impaneled on a grand jury, you've got judges and prosecutors telling them what they can do, what they should do, what they have to do, and that is incorrect.
Oh yeah, there's all kinds of things that are incorrect. We got a couple examples of those in the next section. I found that, but like once a panel, the grand jury can quite literally investigate anything they want to without any inhibitions. And that quote that Richard Younger had said was, "Their oath assigned no limit to their area of inquiry save their own diligence." And then this whole next sentence too it's from David Zuniga in the book Time to Start Over America, which is on this subject. It says, "So when citizen inquest panels instruct your militia unit to go execute a search warrant, subpoena, or arrest warrant, citizens see it as what it is: law enforcement, not a gang of pseudo soldiers shooting assault rifles in the woods," which was what we talked about in our opening comments.
Right.
And I think that's huge too, because a lot of people have the misnomer that this is what militia looks like. In reality, it's not. It's more like what your police force, what your detective agencies look like when executing the laws of the Union in place of the militia.
Yeah. No, that's again, I just encourage people to just from time to time as we're going through, just close your eyes and imagine.
Marinate.
Close your eyes and imagine that militia does not look like guys with ARs in the woods, running around under no one's control or authority or accountability. And then imagine what we're talking about here, and what the Constitution really envisioned was militia. And the Constitution envisioned it because that's the way militia was at the founding of our republic. This, like you say, it's much more low key, low profile.
Mature.
Boy, that's a great word for it. Mature, yeah. No rah-rah. Yeah.
And then, so I'll show a couple of things that we've got here. Honestly, to start the education on this, that book that I was talking about from David Zuniga, The Time to Start Over America, that's what that one looks like. We've got all kinds of texts on this. Another one is Grand Jury Awake. And there's a breakdown in the appendices of these on how they actually function and what the rules that are regulating your local militia based on your state. I mean, not militia, but grand jury based on your state. And if you really want to go back and kind of verify the things that we were talking about, whereas the grand jury was that critical element to allowing us to push back against the king, that was actually the reason why we were able to have the Revolutionary War and have this great republic that we've been gifted. You go and Richard Younger's People's Panel. It's a reprint that was almost out of print, but Tactical Civics kind of revived it. It's a wealth of knowledge. It's
And so
huge.
all three of those are available easily and inexpensively on Amazon. So
Yep. And the other one that's available on Amazon is the Citizens Rulebook that goes into a lot of the premise behind what grand jury is. The thing that I love about it most is that it puts the 10 commandments right next to the 10 planks of the Marxist Manifesto. And it shows what a temper tantrum the Marxist Manifesto is, because it's like the first commandment, here's Mark's answer to how he's going to destabilize that.
yeah,
Second commandment, and so on.
yeah.
It's a temper tantrum.
You know, as you're saying that, Kevin, yeah, I could just imagine it might be a good exercise too, to take all that. So you've got the Ten Commandments, and then you've got Mark's, blabbing on there, and then right next to those two, you could put up Deuteronomy, the blessings and the curses.
Yes.
What, and boy, I bet you that would be
Chapter 28.
a healthy study.
Would be. Indeed, it would be.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so we're talking in this series that that we've spoken about militia in particular, but I think people probably, as we, and I've observed this about you and I, Kevin, as we're discussing, we want to showcase and highlight things about militia, but it's really almost impossible to separate militia from grand jury.
Mm-hmm.
The two need to go hand in glove, so to speak, in order for either one of them to be effective. And so kind of the way that I think we're looking at it is that grand jury is what we would call the main effort, and militia is what we would call the supporting effort. So grand jury is kind of, it's impaneled and it's the highest authority, and that impaneled grand jury is calling the shots, so to speak, and militia is there to do its bidding. Is that a fair description?
Yeah, you can almost akin it to special forces. Like whenever things get out of hand, or whenever things get to the point where now you're within the mission set of a certain special forces unit, you call on that unit to do what it is that they've been training to do.
Right.
And that's what the militia is. And so the main effort, supporting effort, it's essentially, I'm familiar with it because it is a way in the military that commanders, when conveying what the mission is, can coordinate effort. So they can say, this element is the main effort, this is what they're going to be doing. And then this element is the supporting effort, this is what they're going to be doing to supply the main effort with their ability to execute. Mm-hmm. So you understand what your job is specifically. And we've mentioned 70-30, grand jury is 70%, militia is 30%. And it's really, if the grand jury is able to do everything that it's supposed to do, it essentially never has to move into the militia, because we're keeping order and discipline on behalf of the people, on what they actually want, not right. What serving government transpired.
It again, this just popped into my head, but see what you think about it. The idea of peace through strength. Mm-hmm. In other words, you've got grand jury doing what it's supposed to do, and the fact that militia is there, it changes at hand all the time, probably means that militia doesn't have to get neck deep in every situation, because they're there, and they're there to add strength and, as we say, teeth to what the grand jury is doing. And okay, so now let's take that right there, and let's do as we continually want to do. Those two tools, as I call them, grand jury and militia, they're up, fully operational, doing what they're supposed to do, is how we enforce the Constitution.
Yes.
You
Yep.
know, it's great to have the Constitution and to have all of that written down, but unless you've got we, the people, working as grand jury and working as militia there to see to the idea that the servants that we've elected to fill those positions in our government, you know, we the people are responsible. We have a duty to
Hmm.
see that those servants operate within the bounds of that Constitution, and grand jury and militia are how we do that.
Yeah. Inspect what you expect.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you know, to even just you know, to even make that a plainer, in other words, if the servants that we elect know that if they begin to just kind of do what they want to do instead of operating within the bounds of the Constitution, if they know that we the people via grand jury and militia are watching them and are ready to take action if they try to operate outside the bounds of the Constitution, they're much more likely to operate within the bounds. You know, I continue to say once we get a bunch of these counties with grand jury and militia functioning correctly to where we are investigating criminality in our servants, and we are indicting, and we are trying, and we are convicting, and we are incarcerating. In other words, there once those servants know that, oh,
Accountability.
there's a consequence to me not uh, operating within the bounds of the Constitution. I could get thrown in the clink over this. They'll stop doing it.
Maybe organized crime's not such a good way of life, and they'd actually act like servants because they
Yeah,
definitely don't act like servants now.
yeah. So anyway, another one of my parenthetical descriptions along the way here. So, well, so in this section, Kevin, and we've talked a little bit about this. Might be a good time to maybe begin to introduce the idea that, you know, we're kind of looking we're taking militia apart, putting it back together so that people can kind of understand the workings of it. But when we kind of get the theory down in these episodes, our plan is, at least at this point, we think our plan is to come back and maybe give some real time examples of, okay, let's all close our eyes and imagine that grand jury and militia are up and operational in my county. And
Hmm.
then let's imagine that, you know, a handful of people come and say, hey, we believe that this servant is doing, you know, is breaking the law.
Hmm.
And then follow that whole case through. What would that look like on the ground? And so I think we'll probably be doing some of that. But this thing that we're going to touch on here next, I think Kevin kind of maybe dips our toe in that idea. So why don't you kind of continue with this example?
Yeah, this would be a quick primer, and obviously, like since the way that things operate, you need a little context. But so imagine for a moment a local judge impanels a grand jury, but a subsequent investigation uncovers that he's used his position to traffic, kidnap children through the county. The grand jury then generates an indictment and hands it over to the militia to the arrested judge, right? That's in a perfect world. So currently, the grand jury turns a presentment over to the DA because grand juries do exist and they are used. It's just that not necessarily in the capacity. They turn that presentment over to the DA to draft a bill of indictment for him to, in turn, return it back to the grand jury for a vote. But in the interim, the DA, he can actually choose not to pursue the indictment regardless of what the grand jury presents. So the grand jury can give a presentment and the DA can look at it and say, okay, I'll write this bill for indictment, or no, I'm not even going to acknowledge this. So whoever's pocket the DA's in, or whoever in a higher position than his that may be in a government area that has a conflict of interest for what that in that presentment would uncover, can affect one person.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this impaneled grand jury just investigated, found some wrongdoing, and they wanted to do something about it. They thought it was important enough, but the DA says, not going to do it, right?
So right there it's just the beginnings of a great example of how grand jury today is being misused. And it's being misused because the people who are impaneled on that grand jury don't know their authority. Okay. So in other words, they're being bossed around by a district attorney or a judge or a prosecutor, whatever. And so again, that's why we're doing what we're doing. So go ahead and continue.
Yeah. But for this sake, let's say that he does draft a bill and then the grand jury votes on it. The indictment is handed off to the sheriff to arrest. The sheriff, too, can choose not to arrest because he's the highest elected official in the county, right? So now you've got this conundrum of like, you've got these officials that are officials is a bad word. I'm sorry I use that terminology. But now you've got these elected people. DA is not elected. Sheriff is elected. You've got elected and unelected power brokers within the community that can essentially put an all stop to law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
And
say that again. Say that again.
They can put a stop to
enforcement. They can put a stop to law enforcement. And certainly we could say it, they could put a stop to Constitution enforcement.
Indeed. Yes. That's probably a better way to put it. So in true common law framework, there would be no DA. I don't know where that came from, but it's a usurpation. Not to say that the people that are in it are always bad, just to say that it's not supposed to be there. Mm-hmm. But with the militia standing by to represent the people in support of that grand jury, all parties in this scenario would be subject to oversight. So immediately, once you put that, what is it? There's the little itty bitty lamb with the knock knees that says how our servant government sees us. And then there's the rhinoceros that's like massive, staring at you with his horn sticking at you. It's like how the servants will see us. Like that's the difference right there. It's a good visual.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Grand jury. Just everybody look. Grand jury, rhinoceros. There. A show of strength.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean that the rhinoceros is always running at 60 miles an hour. Even though he probably can. I don't know what rhinoceros top speed is, but it doesn't mean that he's always throwing that around. But there he is with all that authority and certainly all that power.
Well, it's the bison that's sitting in Yellowstone, and you've got the photographer trying to get super close. And whenever he gets too close, he pays the price, right?
Yeah.
And it's whenever you involve yourself in organized crime, you're going to pay the price because we actually have the function. This is what they meant back in the 70s and 80s. The protests that talked about power to the people. This is the step-by-step lawful power to the people, but it's been slowly usurped. But the way this system was designed, I guess let me back up and get my bearings about me. The two positions, the DA and the sheriff, they were created after the grand jury was essentially castrated or in the path of castrating the grand jury. Now, the sheriff we know goes back to ancient England, the shire reeve, tax collector for the king, still is the exact same thing. And if you don't believe us, don't pay your property taxes.
Yeah. But the classic example.
Yeah, but it's that slow administrative creep, and they become an obstacle to the people enforcing the law as dictated by the federal constitution and supported by every state constitution, like we talked about in the beginning. But so it's sort of an example, sort of a lesson, but that's a good primer for what we're going to look into in the future whenever we go and kind of dissect some scenarios in this light of how it should be, how it shouldn't be. But I guess the $1 million question right now is how do we get back to true common law framework?
Right.
And I think this is something that you're probably better versed in than I am. I see it from one lens, you see it from one lens, but I think we're going to knock this one out of the park.
Well, yeah. So how do that is a kind of a question that we pose to folks that are brand new to tactical civics. In other words, they, all of a sudden the Lord has brought them across our path. Now they know, oh, there's a thing called tactical civics. And well, let's take a look at it. So they say they have a plan to to get us back to, the way things ought to be in this republic. And so when we begin to expose them to that plan, one of the questions we ask, we kind of bring them along. Well, how? So we got this big problem over here. We've got criminality. We've got our what we call our criminal servants. We elect them, and of course, talking on the federal level, Congress, we elect them. They go back to Washington D.C. They congregate, and even the ones that go with full good intention, as soon as they get in the granite dome, they are handled.
Yes.
Okay. So they may go back saying, I am going to change things. Yeah.
I see you coming a mile away.
The system that is in place right now, organized crime in Washington, D.C., handles those people, and either they learn to play the game the way the establishment wants it played, or essentially they're never heard from again. But certainly they're not effective at creating change. So we say, well, how is this going to happen? Well, for one thing, that's why we the people in Tactical Civics has backed up from the federal government, and we said we're going to tackle this right here locally in our county. How can we accomplish and achieve Constitution enforcement right here in our own county? And so this is where, Kevin, I think a review of our 7 action steps that make up our plan. But specifically, as we're talking here, a grand jury and militia, specifically actions 1, 2, and 3, we have 7 actions for the complete restoration of our republic. Obviously, a long-term, a lot of work, a proposition, but I'm always encouraged by the first 3 actions. And the way we say them very quickly are, we, Tactical Civics, have to get big. And at the same time, we have to get educated. So as people come and join us, they've got to engage and begin to learn what you and I have learned or are learning, and also what we're teaching. And once those 2 things are sufficiently accomplished, say for example, just for discussion's sake, this isn't doctrine yet, but say we had this idea of getting big. So in other words, in a county, Tactical Civics wants to have a membership of at least 0.5% of the population of that county. Okay. So that's the get big part. Now, let's say in 100 counties across this republic, and as I tend to say, in strategically located states. In other words, we might have some of these counties maybe be in the Northeast. We might have some counties in the Southeast. We might have counties in the, the upper Midwest, the lower Midwest, out here on the West Coast, Northwest, Southwest, some states where we have counties, say 100 total, excuse me, that have achieved a membership, Tactical Civics membership of 0.5% of the county population. Then, and let's say we're sufficiently satisfied that membership, those memberships are educated and know this stuff sufficiently to where, they're not going to back down from any politician or, any criminal servant. Then we move in an orchestrated fashion all at once with those 100 counties to go before those councils and push for passage of our ordinances. So get big we have to do first. That's why we're doing it this way. Why do we have to get big? I guarantee if I went to my county council today and said, hey, even if I and 10 of my closest friends like-minded friends, educated friends went to the county council and said, we want these two ordinances passed.
Mhm.
Just speaking of closing your eyes and imagine, we would not be heard. We would be laughed out of the place.
10,
But
11 people doesn't seem like the will of the people, does it?
exactly. But if we have a membership that can be plopped down in those county council chambers and fill every single seat with members flowing out the front door of that courthouse or whatever they meet in, uh, we'll be heard. In other words, we have to get big so that we are not ignorable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, at action number one, action number two, get big and get educated. And then when in an orchestrated fashion, we will go before those county councils and we will get these two ordinances passed, a grand jury ordinance and a militia ordinance. And by the way, in upcoming episodes of this series, we will be getting into probably, possibly both of those ordinances, but certainly into the militia ordinance. So we have the ordinance already. It's already written, the model ordinance that can be taken to the council, and we'll get in and we'll go through that whole thing, and so people can see, what's involved. It's not I think it's a page or two, as I recall. It's not it's not the Obamacare bill. So fairly simple and straightforward, but the point that I love to make at this juncture is when we do that, action number one, action number two, and action number three accomplished, we the people will be enforcing the Constitution.
Yeah.
We don't have to go through all 7 actions in order to get Constitution enforcement. We just have to get grand jury and militia stood up and begin investigating criminality.
Yeah, that's really only the start.
Yeah.
That's the start line. I mean, 7 action steps. They can also be broken down into 4 different phases. Mm-hmm. And I will apologize up front, but I will make this quick. But I love that, like, I came out of the Marine Corps after 22 years, and whenever I ran into tactical civics, at first I was like, okay, we'll see what this is. But whenever I started analyzing this mission, I said, this is it. It addresses the centers of gravity of what the enemy is using to be successful. It attacks their critical vulnerabilities to affect those centers of gravity. I know that gets into terminology that's not familiar to most, but for the military guys that are out there, like, it's a phase line approach. It's a condition set mission that uses those fundamentals to make sure that we are successful in our aim. Mm-hmm. And like you said, get big, build numbers to half 1% in each county, and the majority of the counties in the United States. And then the ones that are just untouchable right now, that are a lot larger, once they see what we're doing, those areas are going to start to gentrify naturally, because they're going to say, well, my friends over in Park County, Colorado, just abolished property taxes, and they're using sales taxes. Like, and that's just an example, but the people in Denver are going to be like, I'm out of here.
That might get people's attention even in those big counties.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. But then, and you do that by learning the material. You don't go into the city council or to the county commissioner's office for your board of county commissioners meeting unless you understand what it is, that it is what we're supposed to be. Because for me, at least, whenever I started to learn the materials in tactical civics, then I was able to extrapolate, where is the organized crime? And it is so riddled with organized crime, because you look at your board of county commissioners, you're like, well, even if they're in your favor, you think, well, these are not bad people. And they're not bad people. They're just trapped within a system that transfers good intent into bad output. Mm-hmm. So learn the materials, get big. Now we're a force to be reckoned with. We implement the ordinances, which you could tell we're on series episode number 6 of one of the tools of the 2 that we're like, it is very complex, but the wave tops of it is really simple. After we pass those and we get constitutional law enforcement reinstated in our counties, then we start to turn the tide in the favor of we the people finally. And at that point, we can set our sights higher. And that's where the next few come from. Ratify the first right in the Bill of Rights. I won't let the beans out of the can or anything with this, because that gets complex too. But that too, it eliminates jurisdiction. Federal jurisdiction in Washington, D.C. is not touchable by we the people in our county levels. But if we ratify the first right in the Bill of Rights that remains unratified, then we do that. Then we bring them home. And that's the next one, is pass the Bring Congress Home Act. Now you've got your federal representative right there in your city, and then your 70-year-old grandma who's just on her way home from the grocery store can stop by and thump him in the forehead for acting a fool. So you've got that accountability that you can reach out and touch. You don't have to travel to another country. Washington, D.C. is considered really another country.
Essentially.
And have them look down their noses at you because their clerks won't even let you in his office unless you have an appointment 6 months out, whatever. And then the indictment engine, I think it's ingenious. We use AI to our benefit because AI, and the Constitution's simple for a third grader to understand. Could you imagine if AI is parsing the Constitution every time a bill is submitted by your federal representative, right?
Yeah. Again, close your eyes and imagine.
Close your eyes and imagine. He's right down the road. He's right down the road in the shopping center next to your grocery store. And he's having a VTC that involves all of the federal Congress. They're voting on something. But when he's voting on that, or when the rest of Congress is voting on it, it's already been parsed through the indictment engine, and it has a constitutionality to it. Yeah. Because if it doesn't, everyone who is a sponsor of that bill, including your representative, is named. And then the local militia can go visit them and say, hey, you guys are trying some funny business. Either you retract this, or we're going to start looking at what assets you have, so that way we can take them.
You know what, Kevin, real quick, another word for indictment engine might be repugnancy detector. Repugnancy detector. Yes, we're going to have our repugnancy detector at hand when anybody brings a proposed piece of legislation. Okay, go ahead, analyze this proposed piece of legislation, and let's see whether it lines up and gets within the bounds of the Constitution or not.
Yeah, it's ingenious. And it's the reason why I love the Tactical Civics Plan, because even then, like after we've got the Republic well back in the grasp of we the people, there's 18 more reform laws to scrape back all those things we were talking about Woodrow Wilson earlier in the 10 planks of the Marxist Manifesto that he put into place during his term. We scrape all that back. We bring it back to a communist republic, because nobody alive today has experienced the freedom that the United States was gifted at its founding. So we can't even conceive of how great this is going to be. But what is it that you said? It's restoration, not revolution.
Correct. There's a breath of fresh air,
Right.
Nobody has to be concerned that, we're trying to overthrow anything. Not at all.
Nope.
But the exact opposite. We're trying to rake back in really what has been an overthrow. I mean, if you ignore our highest human law and do whatever you want, Congress, that right there is the overthrow. We're trying to put things back in the box. So, well, Kevin, I'm watching the clock, and it seems as though we have taken our allotted time today. So, as I said at the beginning, this is always a blast. So much fun to get in and just kind of examine this material and just kind of take a slow walk through. So appreciate all your efforts on it, and certainly for your time today. And so Lord bless you. And with that, I think, folks, we will begin to conclude this episode. As we have said, also, I might remind people that along the way, we are putting together some written documentation of the things that we've discussed along the way, and we hope to have kind of a compendium at the end that we could actually put in your hands. And so that is to come. But we will conclude today. Thanks for coming and listening. Pray about these things. We have got to have the Lord doing his mighty miracles in order for these things to be accomplished. And we believe it's his desire. So with that, I will wish the Lord's blessing upon you.